Hello everybody! Today I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I've read recently. This is covering primarily the months of December and January. Over the past 2 months, honestly, I haven't read as many books as I typically try to do just because we moved and I was so busy and so caught up with our entire moving process that I just really did not dedicate a lot of time to reading. But I do have 4 books to talk to you guys about, and I'm just going to start with the first one, which is the only one that I don't physically have with me because it's packed in a box because I read it in December, basically right before we moved. And this book is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Cannot remember the author to save my life, and I do not have my phone with me, so I can't Google it, but it's a very, very popular book. A very interesting novel. I'm sure a lot of you have read it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It is about a human man that joins this sort of alien figure who is literally just sort of searching around the galaxy and roaming around the galaxy, writing this sort of encyclopedia about all of his findings, and thus The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I find that there are, of course, a lot of cultural references in this novel, and the novel was written, I think, in the 1970s. So for me, someone who wasn't born until the 90s, I feel like there's a good 20 years there of cultural references that just completely went over my head. It was a very well written book. There were parts of it that were very, very funny, and the overall storyline was very intriguing. I just feel like as far as, you know, in essence what the book is supposed to be, a little bit of that just didn't translate well with me because I just wasn't around back then, and I'm not super familiar with some of the events that the book was referencing to. So I think that, you know, if you're kind of closer to my age, it's a good read because it's kind of like a classic, but I don't know if you're going to have like the absolute best time with it. I enjoyed it. Parts of it more than others, but yes, I did read it, and I'm glad that I read it because it's just definitely one of those books that I wanted to read in my lifetime. The next book here, this is Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson. This is a very popular kind of thriller novel. It is about a gal who suffers from very, very severe amnesia, but is sort of different from typical people who have experienced it because she remembers everything that happens to her throughout a day, and then as soon as she falls asleep, everything is completely erased. So each day she has to basically relearn her entire life. You do find out that there was an event of which caused this to happen, and it's a very, very interesting read. It's one of those books that I think I'll remember for a long time. The author really, really fleshes out the main character very well. I feel like a lot of the characters in this novel, I mean, there's not tons, which I really appreciate. This isn't a novel that includes like 20 different characters, very limited on characters, but each and every single one of them are very interesting and are very fun to read. I thought that the author did a fantastic job of really capturing the essence of what it would be like if that was to happen to you. It made it seem very realistic, and as the reader you kind of start to experience it some of yourself. I also think that the perspective of which this is written in is very interesting, and the thing that I like more about this book is the ending and just everything completely wrapped around and turned it into something that I just was not expecting. This definitely has a big plot twist in it, which I love. There are parts in this book that do seem... The cat just wants to chill on top of the chair, guys. Baby, what are you doing? Hi. Hi, boo-boo. Oh, no, you're just gonna... Yeah, you're just gonna lay right there. No, it's cool. Just purr. Just purr and sit there. Oh, but you're so cute. How could I say no to this? Oh, thank you for the mooches. Oh, you're so nice. As I was saying, there are some parts in this novel that are a bit slower than others, and I think that just the nature of the story, it does get kind of repetitive. Some of the events you reread like a million times, but I think that that's just really part of the storyline, and overall it is a very, very strong book, and I would highly recommend that you guys check it out if you do like kind of psychological thriller sort of novels. So after that, I read probably my favorite one in this video, and this is Neil Gaiman's Stardust. This is a book that I've had on my reading list for, I don't know, maybe like a year or two. Like honestly, I've been wanting to read this book for so long, and I don't know what's kept me from it. I think it's primarily that I'm not a huge fan typically of the fantasy science fiction sort of genre, and maybe that's part of the issue I had with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's just never anything that like really intrigues me. I have a hard time really falling for a story that falls within that genre. So I really wanted to read this because everybody said it was amazing, but at the same time I didn't know if it was going to be my kind of amazing. Surprisingly, It totally was. This book completely blew me away. Now, I love Neil Gaiman's Coraline. It is my favorite book. It was my favorite book as a child. It is my favorite movie ever. It is like, oh my gosh. I could make an entire video dedicated to Coraline, and I definitely think that no matter what age you are, you need to read that book. It is technically like a children's literature sort of novel, but it is so incredibly amazing, and I can't even tell you how many times I've considered getting a Coraline tattoo somewhere because I am just that obsessed with that story. So when I saw this in Barnes & Noble, it was just sorting on an end display. I was like, you know what? You need to buy it. You need to get it. So I did, and I must say that this is by far, out of any science fiction, I don't even call it science fiction, it's very fantasy sort of driven. This is my favorite fantasy novel I have ever read. Neil Gaiman's writing is so incredibly beautiful, and it makes everything seem like it could actually happen. And that's what I think is so magical about how he writes, is that you're so engrossed in the story. I seriously finished this book so quick. My husband was like, oh my God, are you seriously almost done with that? Meanwhile, I'm just like for hours and hours just page turning because it was so good. It's about a young man who lives in sort of like, you know, if you could think of a very sort of typical fantasy novel, he lives like in a village, kind of seems like a little bit medieval sort of time-esque. And there's this girl, and he really falls for this girl, and he wants to do anything he can to win the hand of this girl. And the girl tells him that he needs to go catch a fallen star. And the fallen star has fallen in the land of fairy, which is, again, very sort of fantasy-like, but it is so incredibly magical and so beautiful. And just the characters in here are so, ah, man, I'm just like, I'm getting all those emotions again, and I feel like I'm not being very great at describing this because I just feel it so much inside. I'm having a hard time vocalizing it. But all of the characters are just, again, very well fleshed out, very well written, and they all are just so much fun to read. There was not one character in this book that I was like, oh my God, I hate this. And it is told through this perspective, primarily from the boy, but every once in a while this book does kind of switch perspectives between characters, and sometimes when that happens I find that there's always one character that I like more than others. This was one of those rare novels where I didn't have that happen. I was so interested in every single one of these characters, and they're all kind of on the mission to get this same star, and it was so interesting. I mean, I've never really read a book that was like this. It's a very unique, very original idea that I just have not seen, and basically it's just the tale of this boy going to go get the star and try to bring it back to his girl so that he can win her hand. And it's so beautiful, and it's so much fun. It's just one of those books that I promise you, if you decide to pick it up and you decide to read it, you will finish it way too quick, and you're gonna wish that it was longer because it's just incredible. I really like too how the story has these characters and they start to kind of intertwine a bit, and I really enjoy that. And I like how from the beginning it kind of gives you some clues of what's going to happen in the end. There's a lot of really good foreshadowing in this, and you can just tell that Neil Gaiman's entire game plan when it came to writing this novel was just very consistent, because everything at the end just kind of makes a perfect circle and it just completely makes sense. And I love it when books do that because it really shows that the author really thought out the story for a long time. So I love this, and this is by far one of my favorite books that I've read in a very long time. And then very finally, I don't mean to end on a bad note, but this is Sublime. It is by Christina Lauren. And this is a story about a girl who is trapped inside the grounds of sort of a boarding school located in, I think, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And she is a ghost. And that's not really a spoiler. You find it out within like the first chapter. So she is dead, and she is drawn to this boy. Oh my God. I don't know exactly why I wanted to read this so bad. I think that the cover was like really interesting, and honestly, reading the back, I was like, hey, I don't know, maybe I am in the mood for like a paranormal teen romance. The beginning of this book was very strong. I thought it was very interesting because you, along with the girl, are trying to figure out exactly what happened to her. And some of the writing that this author does in this book is great. I'm gonna put it down because I feel like it's kind of annoying for me to just have that there. Sorry if I've done that too much with the other books. But some of the writing in here is just great. The ideas that Christina Lauren has really play out very well, and they are very intriguing as a reader. But unfortunately, I find that to be few and far between in this novel. The beginning was pretty strong, and then she meets this boy, and it's just like within 2 sentences, they're just like madly in love with each other. Like, there is nothing more strong than the love between these two teens, and it's so unrealistic. And even though I know that sometimes teen romance is just supposed to be very I mean, everything is supposed to work out. It's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to give you good feelings like that. But this was just so highly unrealistic that it was very hard for me to try to get behind these two characters, because to me their romance was so extremely physical, which, you know, one of them is living and then there's one that's dead. And so they're basically trying to figure out, how do we make this work? And basically the entire plot of this book is, how can we have sex? Like, that is it. That is literally what this book is about, is how a ghost and a real human can bang. And I'm definitely not a prude in any sense or anything like that. There are some, I wouldn't even call them graphic scenes. They're just mildly suggestive sort of scenes in here. Those don't bother me at all. But the fact that these two characters are so obsessed with just getting it on with one another, and literally that is all the romance is. You never once hear any of the characters talk about things that they like, things that they don't like, things that they hope to accomplish. I mean, normal relationship things. And it's just, like I said, it's very unrealistic. And, you know, it actually was, there was a point in the novel where it kind of picked up a little bit in the middle, but then the ending was just like one of the worst endings to a book that I've ever read, just because it just seems so far-fetched, and I really don't know how I feel about it. I don't feel like this sends a very good message to teens. There's a lot of reference in here to some violence, suicide, stuff like that, that I'm just not a huge fan of. And honestly, I mean, the girl character in here, just such a poor female character. Typical teen romance character. She has no ambitions in her life and really has nothing to do other than just chase this boy around. And surprisingly, the boy was the same exact way. So when you have two very weak characters that are very hard to relate to, it doesn't end up turning into a really good book. I think that the overall kind of premise and the overall idea is really great, but I just feel like it just lacked a lot of substance. The characters were just not very well written at all. And I'm sorry if any of you read this and you liked it, but I just find it to be such a bad paranormal teen romance. I think that if you're looking for something like that, I really suggest the Mara Dyer trilogy. I love that one. That one's kind of paranormal in a different way. This obviously deals with ghosts. That more so just deals with certain powers and stuff like that. But I was kind of looking for like a really haunting ghost kind of romance story. And what I got was just like a lot of overly descriptive sentences, and that's something that I want to talk about too real quick before I wrap up this video. She writes basically all in similes. Like, it got to a point where seriously halfway through this book I was like, oh my god, can the characters just do something without it being like something else? If that makes any sense. She is so overly descriptive and overly metaphorical with her writing that it just gets so annoying, and it starts to not even really make sense, and it kind of becomes self-aware of itself too in that way. There are some points in this book where I think it's kind of funny because it kind of calls itself out on some of its like bullshittery, but it never does anything to fix it. It's just like, hey, we understand that this is very improbable, but here you go. You're gonna spend a couple of days reading it anyway. I don't know, I think it was just very poor writing, and I think that the storyline was good, and I you know, can commend Christina for the idea in certain parts of this novel, but unfortunately the bulk of it was just ugh. So that is all that I have for my books that I have been currently reading, or books that I have read, I should say. Let me know if you guys have read anything really good recently that I should put on my list, as well if you guys have read any of the novels I talked about today, what your thoughts are. But that is it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.